Well, hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Speed Tips by Bob and Chad. I'm glad to see everybody still out there thinking about racing. And I know we've been gone for a month, and a lot of still a lot of racing was going on during that time. I think they raced last weekend down in Vegas, and so there's still been some racing going on. It's winding itself down. We're getting to that time of the year where the season's about over, and now the way these seasons are anymore, there's really not a whole big break in between times because like if you're thinking about getting stuff done to your car or thinking about you almost got to be starting to think about the next year already because man, the time goes fast and the races start early. And for those guys that are going to go to Florida and race, or the guys that are going to Arizona and race, it's not a very long time between now and race season if you're going to start that early. So, how's Chad tonight?
Oh, we're doing pretty good here. We're plugging away, getting ready for the build season chaos that's about to begin with like you said, the off-season preparation for next year, or the winter series that people start down in them other states where it's nice and warm, unlike it is here in Wisconsin. So busy with that, and the boys are working on the catalog, trying to get that finalized. So we're looking to debut the new catalog at the Dome in December. So we'll be there. Billy goes to Syracuse, New York next week for that show. So we're getting into a couple trade shows and the off-season stuff. So we're excited about the catalog. We're going to have that done early. So if you are not on the mailing list, this would be a good time to send an email in and get your name on there so we can get you a print catalog. We're still going to do a print catalog. We looked at how many we print. We keep adding pages, and man, that thing gets expensive, but I still think there's some value of holding it in your hand. So we're thrashing trying to get that guy done.
Yeah, I know. I still, I'm kind of old school. I still go off the catalog. I know, like Austin and Bobby, pretty much go off the internet a lot, but I still look stuff up in the catalog. And whether it's old school or not, I appreciate the catalogs myself.
Yeah.
Well, our first question, we got IMCA Northern Sport Mod. Car is fast and turns well in the heat on a tack racetrack. No changes to the car for the feature. Track dries out and the car always gets tight through the middle of the corner when on the fuel. What would be the go-to adjustment? More than likely, if the car gets tight going when you're on the fuel, that's a left rear deal. You might want to lessen some of the load on the left rear, but it's also very possible that the right front's just not sticking and not scotching up, so you might want to do some things to work on the right front, and maybe a softer right front spring, get the car over on the right front a little bit more. What would your suggestions be, Chad?
Yeah, that sounds pretty right. Yeah, a lot of times, like we always talk, the pace slows, right?
Yep.
So you need to be freer later in the night. A lot of guys tighten up for the slick, and that's actually the wrong way to go.
It's the wrong way to go. Yep, no doubt. Yeah, I've actually a lot of times, raised or even, raised, depending on the racetrack, raised the right rear trailing arm so I just have a little bit more steer to get the car to run through the middle of the corner a little freer. I don't really like that as much coming off the corner. I'd probably, try adjusting it maybe a little less panhard bar because it just all depends on how it must be sticking the right rear. But usually, if it's shoving the nose, that's a left rear, right front combination. Zane says he's an old soul and he still likes catalogs too. LOL. Mark, 2000 GRT, converting it to a USR B Mod. What are the correct rears 3-link brackets for the rear suspension? A lot of drop options available, but I'm unsure of which recommendations are correct. Also, do you prefer a right rear spring on top of the housing or in front of the housing or behind on a slider? I'll let you answer the first part of that question.
So the cage would be our standard 400-4 QA quick adjust. It's the modular 2-link cage. Lets you adjust the shock mounts. Unlike the IMCA world where we kind of have the shock mount in a standard location, non-adjustable, the 404 QAs let you adjust it up and down. So that's what I would put on there.
And then let's go back here. Well, the easiest driving car is going to be that right rear spring on top of the housing. In front of the housing drives really nice, but it sometimes doesn't have quite the forward traction when the racetrack gets slick and goes away. When the racetrack's got grip in it, it's awesome. The tendency is to put that right rear spring behind the housing and run it there especially if you run, your racetracks tend to be pretty slick. You'll have to get a little aggressive with some of your changes to make sure that it's not too tight when the racetrack's got a little grip to it. But, feature time wise, or when the racetrack gets slick, having that right rear behind the housing definitely gives you more bite, because when the car, even though you've got a solid upper link, when the car goes to steer, it rolls away from that spring and lets that right rear fall a little bit more, and it lets the left rear load a little bit harder. So we used to run that back years ago and had a lot of success with that. It tends to be a little tighter getting in, and the transition in the middle is just something that you just have to work with, the transition in your driver and how he drives it. Okay. Okay, Russ, I know what I need. I'll probably just go online and order it. Look through the catalog to find those things I don't know that I needed. That's the advantage of the catalog. Jason, switching to an older Pierce car from a clamped up 4-link to a spring behind. What's the proper way to figure out breakage location on that rear end? What's your thoughts here?
Well, left to right, you're gonna have to line it up with the frame locations. So you're gonna basically get them on there and roughed in, and then look at your bar toe. With the car at ride height, you're gonna want to look at the alignment of the cage bars from the back. So you want to have them bars towed properly. That's going to determine where the cages land on the rear end. And you also need to get your left to right with the panner bars. So there's a couple different measurements there that go into that the cage location for sure.
Yeah, that's the key, is getting everything so that it runs square, but your bar toe is correct, so that when the car rolls into dynamic, that the cage or that the bars are going forward like they're supposed to and not pointing in some off direction. Because you definitely don't want the bars pointing outward. Let's see here. Southern Sport Mod style car went from a 16-inch to a 15-inch spring in the right rear to lower the spring table on the right rear. Is that a big enough change to worry about having to increase spring rate I normally run? I don't think so. If you only changed it an inch, I think the spring rate's probably going to be fine. It's when you go like from a 13 to an 11, when you go to like 2 inches, I think the 2-inch change is where, you're kind of on the fence of having to go a little bit stiffer in spring. And the problem is of course, the stiffer in spring really only needs to be about 12, 13 pounds. And of course, nobody makes springs that are just 13 pounds apart. So you kind of got to go to that 250 if you're running a 225, and it is a standard number. The biggest thing is the location, you know, depending on how close it is out to the tire and whatever. But in answer to your question, if I just dropped 1 inch of spring, I wouldn't worry about, I would run the same weight spring as I had in the car. Jay, I love the catalog. A great go through during winter nights in the shop. Keep them coming, please. Sport Mod, how do I get the car on the right rear more? Currently a 200-pound spring, 4 degrees right rear bar, panhard bars 2 inches below the bottom of the axle tube, and 5 inches of rake. Well, with it being a sport mod, you could get by with a little bit more rake in the panhard bar. That would help it too. I would redo where my actual weight of the car is actually, whatever lead that you've got in the back of the car, possibly rearrange that a little bit. Maybe put just a little bit more towards the right rear. If you've got a lot of weight, sometimes what will happen is people have more weight on the left side because they think the old theory used to be more weight on the left rear gets the car off the corner better, which it in reality it does. The problem with that is it doesn't get it over on the right rear enough. So you got to kind of have the weight evenly distributed between the right side and the left side to keep a good balance in the car. 200-pound spring, I mean, like I said, we run, our standard spring is a 225. We played with some 200s last year. Certain tracks, I think the 200 works pretty decent. But like say Boone Speedway, where I go regularly because it's close to my house, that racetrack and the speed of that racetrack tends to like a 225 right rear spring in it, with a little bit more angle in the panhard bar. Jeff, what length left rear bars do you like on an A mod? Well, that's a great question because we played with that a lot this year, and I'm not so sure that we didn't waste half the season playing with that different length. To go back to the fact that I think we're back to a 17 upper. And I'm not so sure we didn't, the last night out, didn't end up with a 14-inch lower. We tried longer, lower bars, and that helped in some instances, but I felt we still kind of liked the quickness of the shorter bar. What's your opinion, Chad? You know more about that than I do.
Yeah, there's a lot of 15 and 17 cars. That's the two most popular tubes that we sell. That's pretty standard, I would say.
Well, like I said, that's kind of what we ended up with up until the last night. And the last night we actually went to a 14-inch bar, and we had a really good car. I don't know if I can say we had a really good car just because we went to a 14-inch lower bar, because we made a lot of other changes too. But the driver seemed to like the quickness of that shorter bar. Okay. Have you guys ever done a video on how to set your masters with brake bias? Hang on a second. Have you ever done a video on how to set your masters with the brake bias adjuster? Struggling all year, this last year, being tight in, all to find out my brake bias adjuster wasn't set right. Might be something other people struggle with, and thought it would be a good good help and learn the mistakes of mine. Not a bad idea. That's definitely that's a key factor, man. I tell you what, that brake deal is a lot of handling involved in that brake thing. And if that's not working right, man, that car can just be a miserable pig. And we want to make 8 laps or 25 laps be as short as they can be, not as long as they can be. And when the car's not working right, they're pretty long races.
Yeah, that's something that in the schools, Ben does a great job. Ben from
Yeah.
AFCO Baker uh, goes in depth with the whole brake system in the schools. I don't know if you got that on your race tech site or no.
No, we don't. We
No,
definitely, that's a good idea, though. We definitely need to do that.
but if you're out there and you're looking to learn, Bob's schools are great. Got a couple of them coming up, so that would be a good plan for people that need to learn a lot more about the braking system.
Yep. And our schools are on our website, Bob Harris ENT or racetechinfo.com. The schools are all listed there for the January school for the sport mods, February school for the modified 4-link school, and then of course the stock car school. And this year in March, we're going to go back to Pennsylvania and do a school out there at Close Racing Supply and see all you good friends out there in the Northeast. We haven't, it's been 2 years since I've been there. You were there last year for their open house, but I think it's been 2 years since I've been out there. I wasn't out there last year.
Hey, another Bob and Chad first. You dropped new info here on the show, so
There we go. Yes. Taylor, on a 24 GRT by BHE, how far is the front stub turned at the ball joint? Are you turning the stub down on the right? Well, no, it's not turned down. It's just turned. It's 5/8 of an inch at the ball joint is what it's actually turned. So the front end's leading, the right front's leading the left front by 5/8 of an inch. Thoughts on a spring table height on the left rear of a street stock GM metric 4-link, all mounting points in a stock location. Well, it's a little more difficult with some of the street stock applications because of running the stock rules and how the rules are done. You just have to kind of look at a little bit how creative you can be over the off season without upsetting some inspector next spring. I would think that a guy could get by with, it depends on the stock. A lot of those you can't run weight jacks on those things. So you're pretty well stuck with what you have is what you have.
can they even run different height springs? I don't even know.
Well, I think they can. I'm not as familiar with. Maybe Brandon will come in and tell us what the actual rules are because I'm not that familiar with the like the street stock or hobby stock type rules, unless you can use a weight jack. Of course, if you can use a weight jack, well, then that's a piece of cake getting that deal squared away. Whoops. Oh, we got a lot of questions here. Okay, Kenson. Car gets in, has a push in the center. Off what would be the best adjustment to make? USR B Mod. Work on the right front. Try softening the right front spring up a little bit. a small right rear spacer, 1/4 of an inch right rear spacer, move the right rear tire out so that the car doesn't get so stuck on the right rear. It kind of depends on what the push is like, but I would be willing to bet that a softer right front spring would probably help that. And you can do quite a bit with shock absorbers. A softer right front shock would definitely help the car get in and get rolled on the right front sooner to get attitude in the car. And once it gets over on the right front, then you've got more steer in the right rear, and that's going to help turn the car too. So don't ever forget about changing, going to a softer compression shock. Softer compression shock with a little bit more rebound in it would definitely help that car turn in the middle of the corner. What's the effect of running a 1/2 inch longer right rear top bar? From what I understand, it would slow the timing down. Well, I don't know if you're gonna really notice a tremendous amount on a 1/2 inch. You move it, and you're going to notice some, but you're correct on what you understand is the longer the right rear upper bar is, it just makes it respond slower. And sometimes that's not such a bad thing. The problem is though, when you go longer up there, it's going to change how the birdcage indexes because it's going to slow all that down. And when we slow all that down, that can be traction off the corner, but on some racetracks, it could make the car lazy too. So it's kind of a catch-22. What's your thoughts on that, Chad?
Yeah, I mean, if you're just going to take just a 17 off and put a 17.5 on, you're going to change the index so much that it's going to change where that spring stiffness comes into the corner there. But really, the right rear cage, I mean, that thing is max travel pretty fast when you get into compression on the right rear. So like Bob said, there's not a huge change with just a 1/2 inch adjustment there, but you're definitely going to notice a difference.
Yeah, you'll notice some. It's not going to be daylight and dark, but you're going to notice some. Ty wants to know, how critical are the trailing arm lengths as long as the wheelbase is square? Say 16 on the left rear and a 17 on the right rear. What will that cause one to be loose? I don't think it's going to cause the car to be loose at all. I think that it all sounds fine. Now, we run the opposite with the 17 on the left and the 16 on the right. And the reason we do that is so we can run a little bit more angle on the left rear and not have it react so quickly. The 16-inch right rear, that's good. 17-inch right rear is good. I don't think you're going to notice a tremendous amount different. It's just going to be a slower. The 17-inch right rear is going to be a little bit slower to react, which in some situations might not be all bad. Just kind of depends on your car. But like I said, we actually run them the other way around, and the reason is just so that we can make if I could actually get an 18-inch left rear in our car with the way the car is built, I'd run an 18-inch left rear, just like I said, so I could run all kinds of angle, but have it slowed down. But the 17 inch as long as I can get unless we lengthen the wheelbase of the car. That's a huge answer. Are you on the gas? Help me with that one, Chad.
I'm trying to go back to that. I'm not really sure what he means there, but
I was assuming that he was on. I know who he was talking about, but I'm assuming that he was throttled up on the gas, and more than likely, like I said, you got too much left rear traction. Well, I don't want to take any left rear traction away from it, so I want to try to get more stability in that right front. And that is, like I said, shock absorber would probably be my first thing to change. Spring would be okay, but I think I could actually adjust it with a shock absorber and be pretty good. Casey, on a stock car, what is the benefit of having a big spring rate split in the front? For example, 300 pounds lighter than the left front. Also, can you play with the right rear spring rate to loosen or tighten the car on corner entry? If so, how would you go about changing the spring for certain track conditions? Not going to argue with that big spring rate deal personally. And this is just my opinion. I'm not saying that I know everything about everything that there is to know here. I think that's too much of a gap. I think the car still needs to get over on the right front more, but I still think I would rather soften the whole front of the car rather than to put that much split and have a real soft right front and a real stiff left front, because when you do that, you're definitely making the car tighter getting into the corner, and which is going to relate to that right rear spring. Now, back to your next question on the right rear spring. Yeah, definitely you can loosen the car up by changing springs. You go stiffer, you tend to, you got to remember where I want to loosen it up at, because you go stiffer on the spring, you're going to actually tighten the car up with that real stiff left front spring. You're going to actually tighten the car up on corner entry, but it's going to be a little freer on corner exit. So that's where you could probably get by with a little bit lighter spring. But the problem I've run into every time I try running too light a spring on that right rear, you get all kinds of movement, but you don't get any action. And you actually, the car moves and it looks like you're just getting all kinds of hike and all that good stuff. But the problem is the spring's just compressing and not loading the tire. So you got to be careful. That soft spring is going to definitely help you come off the corner better, but it's going to be really lazy in the middle of the corner. So it's kind of a catch-22. I'd rather be a little bit better getting in and a little better through the middle, because the momentum that I will pick up in those two spots should help me get off the corner and make up for what traction I might possibly lose. Ty said that was a USR B Mod. Can too much dynamic trail in the rear end housing carry the car up the racetrack and make the car appear tight? What's the range of trail lead shoot for a dynamic posture? Well, in a dynamic posture, I have always, on a sport mod, I always shoot for 2.5 inches of trail. So in other words, the rear steer in that car, that left rear comes forward enough to the point where I've got about 2.5 inches. It seems like if I get a lot less than that, the car's a little bit tighter. And if the racetrack's real heavy, I can go up to that 3-inch number, but it's not going to be very friendly when the racetrack gets slicker. So statically wise, I've always used that 2.5-inch number. It's always worked well for me. Some guys might run more, some guys might run less, but that's kind of always been the magic number that we've always used. How long do you think a chassis could go without being updated? I have a 2008 Sport Mod A Mod and was considering sending it down to get it updated. Well, it depends on what if nothing's been done to it before, there's definitely some advantages to updating the front end suspension. That definitely I think is a plus because we've had a good success going to the 3-piece spindles and updating the A-frame location for that. That works really well. Rear, I don't really know if you're going to be too far off. Those cars were actually always pretty good. The rear suspension that those cars had, I always thought was pretty decent, and I don't think we're too far away from where they were there in 2008 to where we are today. In reality, what we'd have to do, and what you want to do if it's something that you want us to update for us, I would call a shop tomorrow and talk to Brandon. He used to work at Harris, so he's pretty familiar with what they've got for rear suspension in the back. And he would probably be the one that would tell you more about the rear suspension. But definitely, I would definitely update the front end. I think that would be a huge gain. Those cars were nice cars. I mean, they're well built. If it doesn't have a tremendous amount of nights on it, I wouldn't be too concerned about the race car itself. I think updating some things would make that car pretty good. Greg, IMCA Sport Mod, how getting up on the bars quicker and not unloading so quick off the throttle? Well, you really got to be good at trailer braking. You're running more angle in that left trailing arm is going to get the car up on the bar quicker. But the biggest thing is having the right shock on that left rear for your driver, or for you if you are the driver. A lot of guys, we run a real stiff compression shock to help the car not drop so fast, and a real soft rebound shock to help it get up a little bit quicker. So I would run as much, we run 26 degrees of angle in that left trailing arm at static. And then, like I said, we've got a lot of customers on like a 15-2 compression rebound shock. So it's pretty stiff. It's all you can do to compress the thing. And if your driver's 120 pounds, you don't want him in the tech line trying to compress that shock, because they might not. You need one of your good old boys.
You missed Jared.
I missed Jared.
Yeah, backup one.
Oh, yeah. Chad, is there a way? Oh, hang on. My mouse is too quick to move. Chad, is there a way a guy that runs stock mount shocks in the front able to run or make some type of spring bucket that would have the same effect as a drop cup?
Assuming you're talking about shock through the spring, right? Is that?
I would assume that's the case, yes.
Yeah, so really the only thing you could do to change that and make it feel like a drop cup would be to run a shorter right front spring than the left front spring. I think there's a couple manufacturers that make is it a 1 inch shorter? I don't know if that would be legal there, but really with the shock through there, it's tough without a screw jack to manipulate that spring table on that style suspension.
What's a good ride height start on a factory stock car? What I've always done is I lower the front end to the point where the center of my lower ball joint is about 1/4 to 1/2 inch higher than the mounting point of the A-frame on the frame. And then the rear, I run 1 inch of rake so that the back of the car is basically, you take your frame and run it level, and then raise the ride height in the rear depending on what your ride height rules are, if there's any body rules that you have to make sure that your quarter panels aren't too high if there's a quarter panel rule or whatever. But that's kind of in a general, starting with something that I know nothing about. That's how I would start. Where can I find a setup sheet for a GRT B Mod? I have an old setup sheet I found online in 2017, but I know a lot has changed in 5 years. What I would probably do is give Austin a call tomorrow at the shop, and we'll send you our setup sheet for our sport mod, and you just have to adapt to it. But we've got a pretty detailed setup sheet that we can email to you, and you can print it out, and that's going to give you the measurements of the newer stuff. Bobby says the left rear top bar was 17 1/4 and the right rear bottom bar was 15. Okay, well, I knew we were in that neighborhood somewhere. I couldn't remember if they went to a 14 or if what their lower one was, but I know they made some changes on that. So we were close. So I was able to set up my left rear limit chain through the center of my spring, and it seems to work awesome. Now I'm wondering if I have any ideas on what to tune it with. Maintain dynamic load and change the droop ride height with the screw jack, or lengthen and tightening the chain to adjust dynamic load while maintaining droop and ride height. Well, Joby, you've got a good question there. I'm not really sure if you've run that up there through your middle of your spring. Yeah, I don't know what to tell you on that one. What's your thoughts, Chad?
Well, it's a great location. It's just impossible to adjust and work on. Yeah, I mean that's where you would want it, but the reason that nobody does it is because it's hard to work on.
Right. Ty, what do you recommend for Jbar length or split USR B Mod? Well, it depends on where you're racing. If you're running a real short, tight racetrack, that 19-inch center to center is ideal. If you're running some fairly wide open corners, a lot of momentum stuff, high bank type stuff, that 21-inch bar is pretty good. And that's the advantage of that one bracket that Chad has available to mount the climber bracket on the left rear of the chassis. You can go either inside of that bracket is a 19 and the outside of that bracket's a 21. So it'd be something easy where you could easily have two different panhard bars for if you run a lot of different racetracks. I don't know if I would go to that much work. I mean, I tend to like the 21-inch. Probably if I had my choice, I would be in that neighborhood. But 19 or 20 or 19 and 21 is the two numbers that we normally use. To add to that brake bias question, what's some good tips for guys who have to run single stock mount masters on a hobby stock Camaro running metric calipers in the rear, also with pads to run in the front being a Camaro? Well, you might be over my head on that one because I'm not, once again, I'm just not as versed on that deal. We definitely have a guy at the shop. Once again, I hate to have you guys keep calling the shop, but you're welcome to. If you wanted to call and talk to Braden tomorrow, he's one of our shop guys that has run a hobby stock in the past, and he's worked with that type of a deal, and he could definitely give you some answers on what direction to go with, because like I said, he's got experience running that type of system in his hobby stock over the when he ran his hobby stock a couple of years ago. Brandon says we can run different height springs and weight jacks. Oh, well, heck, that's easy then. Yeah, I would just run a shorter, I'd run a 16-inch left rear spring and a 13-inch right rear spring, and just set your weight jacks accordingly. I think that would be really good.
You missed Jet Sorensen.
Jet, USR A stock car, how much rear stagger do you like to run on a slick racetrack like Deer Creek? Well, Deer Creek, due to the fact that it's a little higher bank, on a real slick type racetrack up there, I would probably still be close to that 1.5 inch number. In fact, Chad and I were talking about this before we started the show, that one of the big problems a lot of these drivers do when the racetracks go slick, they tighten their car up too much to the point where the car won't roll. It won't. With the racetrack being dry, you've got to let it roll in. And Chad was talking about some pavement stuff, and that's boy, if a person ever wanted to get the best knowledge of how to run, ask some of those cup guys. The best knowledge on how to run a car on the edge but still not spin it out on pavement would be ideal for a driver driving dry slick. So the thing is I would rather run a little bit more stagger, maybe tighten the car up a little bit elsewhere, a little more panhard bar in it or something like that. But I really would like to make sure my car rolls as easy as it can through the middle of the corner, because if I can get through the middle of the corner just a little bit faster, I'm going to be faster off the corner, even if I'm at a disadvantage, because I should have less stagger off the corner. Your momentum is going to be so much better that your lap time speed is going to be better. Let's see here.
Ty Evans.
Why are those more Pinto spindles being ran when the AMC spindle appears to be more geometry friendly? Problem with that the AMC spindle is it's not super durable. It's not. I mean, it's a good spindle. There's no doubt about it. It just needs to be a little beefier. Sometimes people believe in this dirt track world that it's a contact sport, and when that happens, it's kind of like those of you who might have watched the truck race on Friday night in Phoenix. Sometimes they take this contact to too high of a degree, and that spindle won't take the abuse that the Pinto or the new metric spindle will. Pinto spindle will actually bend easier. Okay, let's see here. Bob Chad, we need you to politic for us to get quick change in the sport mods. Buying 9-inch gears doesn't save anybody any money. Thanks for all you do on this show. Well, Blake, we appreciate that. In my situation, I have to pick and choose my political battles. And so due to the fact that, yeah, that would really take some political work, you might need to give that a little bit more time. I know Wasoda went to that. They went, so I'm not saying it's not possible. Unlikely, but not possible. Brandon Deere, 16-inch 150 left rear and a 13-inch 250, 275 right rear spring, and run the drop cup on the right rear. Thanks, Troy. That's kind of what I was thinking on that deal, but now we have an actual stock car expert that helped us out with this deal. I appreciate that.
Happy birthday too, right?
Yeah, birthday was on Saturday, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Then we had I was rumbling around the shop half the day before I realized we had donuts. But I didn't really get there super duper early, so I kind of lost part of the morning. Chad, would it be possible for you guys to make a tall, adjustable spring bucket that OD grabbed for the Southern Sport Mod guys so we can run the bearing on top?
So I'm not familiar that much with the Southern Sport Mod. Is that a screwjack car or not?
Yeah, it's basically like a stock car rear suspension.
Oh, so I mean we got a tall OD cup that has a bearing in the top right now. I don't know if that's what you're looking for. 485T would be that part number. You can look at that online, but that's a OD grab, 2-inch tall length with a bearing in the top.
Oh, they're not. Next question. They're not allowed to run weight jacks.
So that
Eliminated that deal.
that changes everything. Yeah. So you're talking about the one that has the plate and then the big thread and that. Yeah, we don't make that, but maybe we need to talk about it. So I like new products. I'll put that on the list, and maybe we'll work on that. Because is the shock go through the middle then?
Well, just a second. He's got U.S. Southern Sport Mods are forgotten when it comes to all the trick stuff.
Well, you're a long ways from Bangor, but we're here. We're here for it. Yeah, I mean that's something that we can definitely take a look at, making a different piece there to go on that style car. We just don't know much about it, so you'd have to call me and give me some details there. But I'm sure we could take a look at it.
And yeah, and Jared said that he asked kind of for about the same thing for it to be like a drop cup. So I don't know if that's a US or a US. It must be
shock through the center is what.
Yeah,
we're talking. Yeah.
AJ, what are your thoughts on running the TH style spring on the right rear with having preload in the left rear, IMCA Sport Mod? Well, I know there's one chassis builder that definitely runs that, and they definitely win some races. I'm not as familiar with that spring. We tried it a little bit in the actual A Mod a couple of years ago and didn't have great success with it. So I didn't really, I've not tried it since then. But I know, like I said, I know there's one chassis builder that's doing that on the sport mods, and those cars are pretty quick. So it might be something worth giving it a try. I don't, the preload in the left or the left rear is definitely going to be a must with that spring to make that combination work. Happy birthday, Troy Jervitz. Thanks for all your help with the stock car this year when I call. Awesome. Troy's been a big asset to our stock car program. He's definitely done a great job this year, and I'm very pleased to have Troy be part of our company. What's the general measurements on a metric car from the ground to the front lower A-arm bolts? Boy, Doug, I can't answer that question. I have no idea. Maybe if Troy's watching, maybe he's got an idea on that one. I wouldn't have a clue. Yes, we can run different length front springs. If I wish, my total installed spring to cup measurement is 12.5 on the left front and 12 3/4, or 12.5 on the right front and 12 3/4 on the left front. So should I look for a 10.5 inch for the left front? And how much would change the spring rate wise? 3,300-pound Camaro with an 850-pound right front spring and a 900-pound left front spring has been tight in, but shock changes have helped that with the 3-inch compression, or 3 compression and 10 rebound, as we run non-rebuildable shocks through the springs. Yeah, that's what I would do. I would try to, because I know that there's some manufacturers are making a taller left front. It's 10.5 or 11, something like that, and that's what I would do. Spring weight wise, I wouldn't change anything. I would go back to the same exact springs that I have. If you get to a 10.5, I'd go with the 900, just like you have right now. When you get to that stiff a spring, length isn't such a big deal. It's when you get to those 150-pound springs or 200-pound springs or 250-pound springs that it's a little more of an inch. Tyler, sport mod with a solid pull bar, what do you recommend the best way to get pinion angle for maximum traction? Well, of course, you're going to have to, with your solid pull bar, it's still going to be adjustable because you've got 2 heims on it. And so, we always run our trailing arm brackets level with 7 degrees of pinion angle in it. So that if you put it on a level, if you put it up on your bench, set it on your trailing arm brackets, we adjust the pinion. Before we weld those trailing arm brackets on, we adjust the pinion angle so that it's at 7 degrees, and then we tack weld those plates or those brackets in place. And then when you put it in your car, it's already going to be preset, and then you just have to fine tune it with a couple turns one way or the other of your upper bar. Adam says no stock mount shocks on the rear, so they can run whatever they want to run on as far as the shock wise in the back of the car. Bill says 15 inches for you. Okay, cool. I'm not sure I understand the 15 inches, but it'll come to me here eventually, I'm sure. IMCA Northern Sport Mod. Is there a benefit to running a drop cup on the right front, and what does it do? Thanks for these shows. They are fantastic. What I've actually, I definitely, on a sport mod, I definitely run a drop cup. Now, we haven't experimented with, Chad just came out with a new drop cup that's not as much of a drop cup as the other one. So we haven't actually experimented with that. I'm wanting to try that on Taylor Cool's car. I know she's going to go to Arizona, so I'm wanting to try. She's got a full drop cup in there now. What it does, it just gets the car on the right front a little bit better because the spring table is lower on the right front than the left front. So when the car goes to roll, it rolls to the right front easier and just makes that transition smoother. Okay, Doug, I hope you're reading this. Troy's giving you the 7.5 and 7 3/4. Well, I could have guessed that one. That's not too far off the bat. Sometimes when it comes to some of the stock car stuff, I get nervous because I'm not 100% sure I know all there is to know about. I mean, I know the basics, but some of these details, I don't work with them. Would you recommend bringing the car to you for updates, or should I bring it to Harris? Well, that would be a political statement due to the fact that, we definitely like to have work. I would say I would definitely recommend bringing it to us. Um, but you got to do what you think is best for you and your situation. We do quite a few other brands of cars other than GRT. In fact, we had one of those models in there today that we were working on. So we're fully capable of working on them. I've got guys that have experience working with those cars, and so especially that year car, maybe some of their newer stuff I don't know as much about, but their older stuff is still closer to like what it was when I used to own the company years ago. So it's definitely something we could help you with if you choose to. Just depends on who you want to work with. It's totally up to you. Okay, let's see here. On a B Mod running a 16-inch spring on the left rear and a 13 on the right rear, what difference would it make to shorten the right rear to an 11? That's going to be a substantial difference. I think that's going to be too much of a difference. It's going to make the car roll to the right rear too quickly and want to lay there too long. I think it's going to make the car very lazy. It's going to be that car that's toting the left front. I think it's too drastic of a change. Thanks for the Jbar linked help. What do you suggest for a Jbar split on a 3/8 mile racetrack? As far as running the split on the car itself, I would start with it in the 0 mode or the 0. As Chad's brackets, they're marked 0 and they have numbers up and down. I would mark dead center in that, and then I would go up 6 inches to my frame, and then you can always adjust. Accordingly, as the racetrack dries out, you can drop it down a half an inch at a time. A lot of guys drop that thing quite a bit, and you don't need to. I mean, a half an inch on a Jbar can be a huge adjustment, so I wouldn't drop it a huge amount. On a stock car, what do you like for pinion angle, and do you include drive shaft angle? No, I don't actually include the drive shaft angle, Chris. We still run in that neighborhood of 5 to 7 degrees. I think the way we put the brackets on the cars and stuff, I still think they're at 7 degrees. I still think there's a little bit of an advantage to having some pinion angle in those cars, traction-wise. I had an engineer tell me I was wetting the head on that deal one time, and so I've had to clarify that statement where it's my belief and it's my opinion, and whether it's right or wrong, that's how I look at it. So you take it from there. But no, I always run. We still run sport mods and the stock cars. We still run 7 degrees. John, on an open mod 4-link, is maintaining right rear travel important when the car handles good in the moisture, but travel extremely decreases when it slicks off? Right rear corner feels dead. Well, once again, this kind of goes back to a possible shock deal. When the racetrack slows down, you might just have to think about going to a softer shock to get the car to transition to the right rear a little bit faster, because you're not going as fast, and so the G-forces aren't there to make that car roll over. The other thing that I've done on that type of a deal is I always run my right rear wheel with a 1/2 inch wheel spacer in it, and then I always take that 1/2 inch wheel spacer out when it gets dry, so that right rear tire comes in just a little bit closer to the center, and that seems to help quite a bit too. Where are we at time-wise? Oh, we're right at 8 o'clock. Okay, I'll do 3 more questions, and then we're up on our time. Bob, I raced at Silver Dollar in Chico and Antioch. With how hooked up those cars are on those California tracks, I've read that some guys say more right rear bite is better versus left rear bite. How do you feel about that? Been running 150 to 180 pounds of bite, and like it turns in, like its turn in effect. Well, the more left rear bite you're going to run, the more it's going to come off the corner harder on the left rear, but it's definitely going to be freer getting in. Personally, I think that's quite a bit of bite for those type of racetracks. I would rather run less bite and move the right rear wheel out with a 1/2-inch spacer, or do some other things to loosen the car up. That's quite a bit of split and bite, to the point where I would think, I would think it would have some issues at some point in time. But yeah, it definitely will turn in better. There's no doubt about that. John says, by extremely, I mean 3/4 of an inch less. Do you remember John's question?
That's the right rear travel, not getting any right rear travel.
Oh, well, right rear shock might be the answer on that. And moving that right rear in 1/2 inch might be a good, and if you can't move the right rear end, I've not been opposed to shortening the Jbar 2 turns, moving the whole rear end to the left a little bit, just to get a little bit more side bite, a little bit more load on that right rear tire. You're probably going to lose, just track time wise, you're going to lose 3/4 of an inch, where that shock might get you half of that back, or at least a 1/2 inch back. Jared, also thanks for all you guys do with these shows. I've watched just about every one the last few weeks once I found out them. Awesome. Well, we appreciate you guys all watching in, and got a great questions tonight. Super good night, and we'll be back here December 4th.
That should work.
Yep. So, all right, you guys have a good night. Let's see, I got a couple more questions here. Jared, already have 3 off with and a 1/2-inch spacer on the right rear, 2 off left rear, 3 off right front with a 3/4-inch spacer, and 3 off with no spacer on the left front. 900-pound left front spring, 800-pound right front spring, 225 left rear leaf spring, and a 200-pound right rear spring. Well, I wish I had more now. I should have a lot of knowledge about leaf springs because I raced them myself for years, and for some reason I don't remember a tremendous amount about the leaf spring. So I can't really help you about that much.
Camaro.
There he has the Camaro. How would you prefer the car come to you for updates, roller or bare chassis? If we're just doing the front end, it could be a roller. If we're doing more than that, but once again, give Brandon a call tomorrow at the shop. Shop number there is 515-292-9200, and talk to Brandon on how he wants it. But if we're just doing the front end, if we're doing a full update, yeah, you better talk to Brandon for sure. I'd hate to tell you one thing and it'd be different. All right. Well, thanks, guys. Have a great night, and we'll see you in a month.
Thanks, everybody.
Hey, Chad.
See you later.